Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastuninnti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Panishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pasyendi Yam Yogino Yasyantam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om Sruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. So the last verse, the 19th verse of the second chapter. Ye enam veti handaram yaschainam mannide khatam ubhautau navijanido nayam hanti nahanyate. This sloka from the second chapter is only a modified adaptation of a similar mantra found in the Kathopanishad. Hanta chen mannide hantum, hatas chen mannide hadam, ubhau tau navijanito, nayam hanti nahanyade. It comes in the Kathopanishad, second chapter, 19th verse. Now, we have already discussed in the earlier sessions that there is a gradual evolution of our understanding of our own true nature, our understanding, our interpretation, our own reading of what we actually are, what my true nature is. At the grossest level, we identify ourselves with the sense objects, the senses, or the mind, or the intellect. But beyond all this, when we continue our inner journey, guided by the light of scriptures and spiritual practices, we reach a true understanding of our true nature. So it is a kind of self-discovery that we reach through this inner spiritual journey. For this spiritual journey, we need a light to guide us, to help us. And scriptures constitute the light that will guide us in this inner spiritual journey. So once we reach this realization or this self-discovery, we realize the fact that we are the Atman, we are the omnipresent, the omniscient, the immanent, the transcendental, absolute reality, which is birthless and deathless. It always exists, so it cannot come into existence, and therefore it cannot cease to exist. So that's why in the 18th verse of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna established, he clearly stated the fact, this Atma is Nitya, Anasi and Aprameya. Naiva Vacha Anamanasa Praptum Shakyo Chakshusha Kathopanishad. Many other scriptures make this point. And once we realize this truth, we do not run away from the world in which we are living. We do not run away from our obligations and duties and responsibilities. Rather, there is a process of reprioritization of our own life and our goals, our purposes in life. So once we realize that the world, the senses, the empirical universe is real only in a relative sense, not real in the absolute sense, then we'll be able to look upon the problems of the world, we look upon the dilemmas and problems that we confront in our daily life from a higher perspective. That's why it is said, when we reach this state, we become established sthita prajna. That's why in the second chapter, while discussing sthita prajna lakshanas, Lord Krishna makes it clear, Atmanneva Atmana Tushta Sthita Prajnas Taduchyade. Sthita Prajna is one who is Atmaneva Atmana Tushta. He experiences a divine contentment in his identity with his own true self. And then he goes beyond senses, mind, intellect, and he realizes his identity with Atman. In our daily life, when we confront different problems at the physical and psychological level, if we can keep in our mind this fact that our true identity is beyond mind, then many of the problems, many of the psychological problems will find a permanent solution, because psychological problems cannot and do not have permanent solution at the psychological level. Psychological problems can have a permanent solution only at the spiritual level. So we are now going to discuss the 20th verse of the second chapter. In the second chapter, in 20th verse, the Bhashyam, Sri Shankaracharya, introduces this verse. Katham avikriya atma idi didiyo mantra. So, in the earlier verse, it was clearly stated, this atma is avikriya. You can find towards the end of the Bhashya on the previous verse, Tau ubhau na vijanitu na jnanavantu avivekena atmanam aham pratyaya vishayam. This is towards the end of the Bhashya on the 19th verse. Hanta aham kada asmi aham idi deha hananena atmanam yau vijanitaha tau atmaswarupa anabhijnau ityartha. So those who consider, those who identify themselves with the activities of their indriyas, the senses, or those who think that their true nature, Atman, is involved in activities, they do not know the true nature of their self, because the self, the Atman, is beyond any kind of activity. Senses engage in different activities. Mind and senses together engage in different activities. The Atman is only witness, the eternal subject. But very often, due to ignorance, we interpret that the Atman is engaged in all these activities. So Bhashyakara says, those who identify Atman as the Karta and Bhokta, as the doer and enjoyer of the actions, they do not know the true nature of Atman. Yasmat nayam atma handi hanana kriyayaha karta bhavadi nahanyadi naja karma bhavadi ityartha avikriyatvad. So Bhashyakara says, this Atma doesn't become the karta, the doer of any of the actions performed by the karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, the senses of action and the senses of perception. Before, Lord Krishna says that, oh Arjuna, you need not worry about in somebody being killed by your actions, or yourself being killed by somebody, because Arjuna was trying to run away from his duties and responsibilities, because he interpreted his true nature to be his body. But Lord Krishna says, body, indriyas, mind, all these are at the empirical level. His true nature is Atma. And this Atma is avikriya. Atma doesn't engage in any activities or any kind of engagements. So here Bhashyakara introduces the second verse of this particular prakarana, that is the 20th verse, continues the discussion initiated in the 19th verse. Katham avikriya atma iti didiyo mantra. So the 20th verse is a continuation of the same topic initiated in the 19th verse. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् न्यायं भूत्वा भविदा वा न भूयः अजो नित्यशाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. This is the 20th verse. न जायते न म्रियते वा कदाचित् अयं that is this atma bhutva bhuyah abhavidana ajaha nityaha shashwataha puranaha ayam hanyamane sharire na hanyate. So this atman, this soul is neither born nor does it die. It is by its true nature aja, which is unborn, nitya, which is eternal. It will never cease to exist. Shashwata, it is continual, eternal, immortal, and always existing. Purana, it is primeval. I am hanyamane sharire na hanyate. This verse is very, very important because it introduces some very important technical terms that Vedanta uses while describing the indescribable Atman. Aja, Nitya, Shashwata, Purana. These four important terms are introduced in this 20th verse. And in the coming verse, the word Avyaya, that is Kshayarekhita, also will be introduced. Now I shall just read the Bhashya first and then discuss one after another. न जायते न उत्पद्यते जनिलक्षणा वस्तु विक्रिया न आत्मनो विद्यते इत्यर्थः. न म्रियते वा शब्द चार्थे न म्रियते च इति अन्त्या विनाशलक्षणा विक्रिया प्रतिषिध्यते. कदाचित् शब्दः सर्वविक्रिया प्रतिषेधैः सम्बध्यते. न कदाचित् जायते न कदाचित् म्रियते इत्येवम्. यस्मा अयम् आत्मा भूत्वा भवनक्रियाम् अनुभूय पश्चात् अभविता अभावं गन्ता न भूयः पुनः तस्मात् न म्रियते. यो हि भूत्वा न भविता सम्रियते इति उच्यते लोके. वा शब्दात् न शब्दाच्च अयम् आत्मा अभूत्वा भविता वा न देहवत् न भूयः पुनः तस्मात् न जायते. यो हि अभूत्वा भविता स जायते इति उच्यते. न एवम् आत्मा अतो न जायते. यस्मात् एवं तस्मात् अजः यस्मात् न म्रियते तस्मात् नित्यः च. यद्यपि आदिन्तयोः विक्रिययोः प्रतिषेधे सर्वविक्रियाः प्रतिषिद्धा भवन्ति तथापि मध्यभाविनीनां विक्रियाणां सुशब्दैः एव तदर्थैः प्रतिषेधः कर्तव्यः इति अनुक्तानाम् अपि यौवनादि समस्तविक्रियाणां प्रतिषेधः यथा स्यात् इति आह शाश्वत इत्यादिना. शाश्वत इति अपक्षयलक्षणा विक्रिया प्रतिषिध्यते. शाश्वतभवः शाश्वतः न अपक्षीयते स्वरूपेण निरवयवत्वात् निर्गुणत्वात् च न अपि गुणक्षयेण अपक्षयः. अपक्षय विपरीत अपि वृद्धिलक्षणा विक्रिया प्रतिषिध्यते पुराण इति. यो हि अवयवागमेन उपजीयते स वर्धते अभिनवः इति च उच्यते. अयं तु आत्मा निरवयवत्वात् पुरा अपि नव एव इति पुराणो न वर्धते इत्यर्थः. तथा न हन्यते न विपरिणम्यते हन्यमाने विपरिणम्यमाने अपि शरीरे. हन्ति अत्र विपरिणामार्थो द्रष्टव्यः. अपुनरुक्ततायै न विपरिणम्यते इत्यर्थः. अस्मिन् मन्त्रे षड्भावविकारा लौकिकवस्तुविक्रिया आत्मनि प्रतिषिध्यन्ते. सर्वप्रकारविक्रियारहितः आत्मा इति वाक्यार्थः. यस्मात् एवं तस्मात् उभौ तौ न विजानीतः इति पूर्वेण मन्त्रेण अस्य सम्बन्धः. So we will have a detailed discussion of some of these very, very important terms used in this particular Bhashya. First, it is stated in the 20th verse, Atma is aja. The word aja implies janmadi kriya nishedha, janmarahita. It means Atma never comes into existence, Atma never takes birth. So birth or coming to existence implies some kind of a change from a state of non-existence into a state of existence at the empirical level. Atma is always existing. There is no time, no place, there is nothing in which Atma is not existing. So how can such a thing come into existence? How can it be born? So it is said aja, Atma is aja. So the great commentator Madhusudana, the author of Gudhartha Deepika, says Jayade asti vardhade vivanamade apakshiyede vinashyati iti varshayani nairuktaha. So the great Madhusudana says, he is referring to the school of Nirukta. Niruktam is a famous, maybe the earliest form of some kind of an interpretation of the Vaidika mantras, Vaidika Ruk mantras, about 500 Ruk mantras taken up by Yaska, and he gives interpretation like Devodana, Vadyapana, Vadyovatana, Vadyusthana, Vabhavati. Deva Shabda has got these four meanings like that. Now here Madhusudana says Vashyayani Riti. So Vashyayani is a great writer belonging to the Nirukta school. So according to him, these are Sabvikaras, 6 modifications, 6 changes. It begins with birth and it ends with death or nasha. So anything which comes into existence has to come into existence, then exist, then it has to grow, evolve, and then it begins to decay, and then finally it gets lost, it dies out. So these are the 6 vikaras, changes. So the word ajam itself, ajo nityashasudoyam purano, the word ajaha itself implies this Atma is sarvikara atida. Jayade asti vardhade viparinamate apakshiyede vinashyati iti sadbhava vikara iti vashyayani nairuktaha. So according to Nirukta school, these are the 6 changes. So Lord Krishna says this Atman is devoid of any of these changes. The second term is ajo nityashasudoyam purano. Nitya implies nasharekida. It is deathless. If Atma is unborn, if it is birthless, then naturally it is also deathless. So because Atma is aja and nitya, both janma and nasha, both birth and death are denied in Atma. Another term used is shashwata. Shashwata has got a great significance. Shashwata means this Atma is devoid of 2 types of apakshaya. One is Surupa apakshaya, the other is Guna apakshaya. Because this Atma is avayava rehita, this Atma it doesn't consist of parts. Anything which is made of parts will naturally lose its original nature, which means it will undergo change or modification, which means it cannot be eternal. Atma is not made of parts, so it is called avayava rehita. It is one reality. A machine made of different parts will lose its identity or usefulness when one part is removed from the machine. It ceases to be the machine for which it is made or built. So the word Shashwata implies Surupa Apakshaya Nishedha. Atma doesn't have Surupa Apakshaya. Its real nature is never disturbed or destroyed because it is not made of parts. Again, it cannot have any kind of modification in the form of something being added to it. So either apakshaya or vriddhi, both can be some kind of a change. If you add something to it, that also implies some kind of a change, vikara. And if something is lost, then also it is some kind of a change. Nothing can be added to Atman and nothing can be taken away from Atman. So Atman is avayava rahita. It cannot have any kind of Surupa Apakshaya. Its true nature cannot be disturbed or destroyed. The second implication is Atman is guna rahita. So any kind of apakshaya, any kind of loss or any kind of change due to loss of some of his characteristics, that also cannot happen to Atman. If you have something and if it has got an essential characteristic, and if that characteristic is lost, then the original nature of that particular entity will be disturbed. But in this case, Atma is Gunarehita. Here we should always remember, Gunarehita doesn't mean devoid of all gunas, rather it means transcending all gunas. So we have to remember this very, very important principle. When Atman is described as attributeless, it doesn't mean that Atman cannot have any attributes in the sense it is a deficiency. No, Atman is beyond the limitations imposed by attributes. Atman transcends the limitations imposed by any attributes. If Atman is described as Nirakara, it doesn't necessarily mean that Atman is devoid of form. It only means Atman transcends the limitations imposed by a particular kind of form. If you say something has a definite form, then you are defining it, you are describing it, you are limiting it into the straitjacket of a few words. That Atman has got this particular quality, Atman has got this particular form. So when Atman is described as Gunarehita, it means Gunatita, transcending gunas. If Atman is described as Nirakara, it means Akaratita, transcending forms. Similarly, if Atman is described as indescribable, if it is non-definable, it only means it cannot be explained in words. Because whatever you explain in words will have certain conditions. Pancha Sabda Pravarti. 5 types of verbalization is called. So, if you want to explain something with the help of some connection, some association of certain characteristics, some associations, you can say Jati belongs to one particular species. Guna, it has got a particular color, a characteristic, an attribute of red flower, white flower, and so on. Or a particular animal belonging to a particular species. Or if you want to explain somebody, well, he is a musician, which means music is his profession, his job. You are defining a person as a musician in terms of the work that he does or the profession that he is practicing. Or if you say he is a brother, sister, and so on, you are defining a person in relation to some kind of a sambandha, some relation, connection, or something. Or dravya. If you say Atman is like, something is like sun, which is Swayam Pratyaksha. So you are trying to explain something which is quite well known. So what it implies is the Atman is beyond description. There is, it implies Pancha Sabda Pravritti Nishedha. The indescribability, the non-definability of Atman is implied. So the word Shashwata implies the Atman is beyond any kind of either addition or loss of its characteristics. It cannot have any kind of Surupa Apakshaya because it is Avayava Rahita, it is not composed of parts, and it cannot have any kind of Guna Apakshaya because it is beyond any kind of gunas or attributes. A great commentator who followed Shankaracharya's tradition wrote a work, it's called Bhashyam Deepika on the Gita. So he says, Shashwat Bhava Shashwataka Ityanena Apakshayasya Niravayavatva Nirgunatvad. So Niravayavatvam and Nirgunatvam. Atman is not composed of any avayavas, any parts. And Atman doesn't have any defining characteristics or attributes. In the sense, Atman is beyond, it transcends all attributes and all limitations implied by parts, etc. Because it always exists, it is continual, perpetual, eternal. That is that's implication of the word Shashwata. Ajo Nitya Shashwadoyam Purano. The next important word used in this context is Purana. So that's also very, very important. The word Purana is used for the purpose of Vruddhi Nishedha. As I mentioned already, Pura Api Nava. That is the real implication of Purana. Something that is always new. Nanu ajattum nityuttum shashwadattum cha akashe abhi asti iti aka purana iti. A famous statement is worth referring to. Maybe we can remember this particular description by Nilakanta in his Vyakhya, Nilakanta Vyakhya. So Nilakanta in this context says, why this word Purana is used? Now, Nanu ajattum nityattum shashwadattum cha akashe abhi asti iti aka purana iti. Now, you can use the word aja, nitya and shashwata even in the context of sky or sun. Many of these universal entities, relatively speaking, compared to other empirical entities, can be called aja, because always existing, relatively speaking, and nitya, and also shashwata. So somebody may argue, well, Atman is not the only thing which can be Purana. Akasha also, the sky also, may be considered to be nitya, relatively speaking. Because trees and mountains, human beings and different species take birth. We do not know when Akasha, space, came into existence. So Akasha can be called Aja, birthless, beyond birth. It is so nitya. It remains the same and it doesn't get destroyed, relatively speaking, at empirical level at least. So it is nitya. It is also shashwata, continual, perpetual, eternal. So somebody can argue, Atman is not the only thing that could be called Aja, Nitya and Shashwata. Akash also can be called Aja, Nitya and Shashwata. So Akashya bhi asti iti aha purana iti. In order to fulfill that vacuum, to satisfy that kind of an argument, according to Nilakanta, Lord Krishna uses the word Purana. Pura Vedadi Sushtehe Pragavi Nava Eva. So Pura Api Nava Eva. So this Atman was new even long before the creation of everything. It is ancient but is perpetually new because it doesn't have any kind of aging. It doesn't come into existence, it doesn't undergo any modification, it remains the same. It doesn't grow, it doesn't evolve, it doesn't undergo decay, it doesn't get destroyed. So you cannot say that this Atman is like sky. Long before the creation of sky or the moons or the sun. The Atman was there and it was new all the time. So though it is the most ancient in the sense it existed always, it also remains new. So it is ancient and also new. In other words, old and new cannot be used in the context of Atman. It is beyond any kind of description, any kind of definition. Of course, the word Purana has got other meanings. Maybe incidentally, in order to understand the philosophical significance of the word Purana used in this particular 20th verse, perhaps it's better, it would be useful to remember what the word Purana implies according to traditional interpreters. Amaragosha says Puratanam Chirantanam. That is the meaning that Amarasimha gives in the Amaragosha, the ancient lexicon. Of course, Purana has got another important relevance. When you don't find something in Vedas or Smrtis, then you refer to Puranas. Yet nadrishtam hi Vedeshu nadrishtam Smritishu Dija Ubhayo yet nadrishtam chatat Puraneshu drishyate. What you do not find in the Srutis, that is Vedas and Smritis, what you are not able to locate or what you cannot prove by getting a verbal testimony or a pramana from Vedas and Smritis, then you may refer to Puranas. So this Smriti Purananam virodho yatra drishyate tatra sraudam pramanam syat tayodvaiti smriti vara. So Purana is the last of these three triple canons of Hindu Vedanta philosophy, that is Vedas or Srutis and Smritis, and the third Puranas. Sargascha pradisargascha vamsho manuntiranicha vamshani charidanchaiva Puranam panchalakshanam. Atra sargo visargascha sthanam poshanam udeha manantari ishanagata nirodho muktiraseka. These are all Panchalakshanam and Dasalakshanam Purana characteristics of Puranas, normally used to explain the importance of great Puranic literature like Bhagavad Purana and other Puranas. But in this particular context, the word Purana has got a great philosophical, metaphysical significance. It remains ancient, it is the most ancient in the sense it always existed. At the same time, it doesn't get aged. It always new, it's always the most ancient. In that sense, the word Purana is used. Now we will have a detailed discussion of the Bhashya. So Bhashyagara, we will discuss again in detail, word by word. Na jayade na utpadyade janilakshana vastu vikriya na atmano vidyate ityartha. So, na jayate implies it is not produced. Janilakshana vastu vikriya na atmano vidyate ityartha. That is, there is no sign, no implication, no indication of any kind of modification like birth in Atman. Ityartha, this is the meaning. Namryadeva, and it doesn't die. So the point is, when the word Ajay is used, in the sense it is birthless, it also indirectly, through Upalakshana tradition, it implies that the other five changes are also denied in Atman. Va shabda charthe. So there is a syllable va is used, it implies and. That's the meaning. Namryade cha idi andhya vinashalakshana vikriya pradishidhyate. So Bhashyagara says the particular expression in the mantra na jayate na mriyate. So the na should be added to the word mriyate also. So na mriyate, it means the Atman doesn't have modification in the form of destruction or death. It remains same. Andhya vinashalakshana vikriya pradishidhyate. Kadadi shabdaham sarva vikriya pradishedhihi sambadhyate na kadajit jayate na kadajit maryade iti evam. So the word kadajit is used, means ever. It should be connected with a complete, total and absolute denial of all sorts of changes and modifications. So kadajit is important in this particular verse. Na jayate mriyate va kadajit. Na kadajit. So the word kadajit should be connected, or it should be taken to imply that the verse establishes complete denial, absolute denial, total denial of any kinds of modifications in Atman. And therefore, it should be construed, what it says, na kadajit jayate, na kadajit mriyate ityevam. It should be construed as never born, never dies, etc. Na kadajit jayate, na kadajit mriyate, etc. Yasmat ayam atma bhutva bhavanakriyam anubhuya paschat abhavida bhavam aganta na bhuyaha punattasmat na mriyade. So, again, this atma existing for some time and becoming non-existent, this cannot and will not happen, because Atman is always existing. Yohi bhutva na bhavida samriyade iti uchyate loki. So a normal conventional expression is referred to here. Normally, whenever we use the word something dying, what it means, it becomes non-existent. So Atman is never born, and for that reason it never dies. Va sabdat na sabdacha ayam atma abhutva bhavida va dehavat na bhuyaha punattasma na jayate. Now there are a few terms used here, two syllables used, va and na. So what is meant by is unlike this body, the Atman doesn't come into existence from a state of non-existence. Therefore, it is not born. So from a Vedantic perspective, birth implies a change. But really speaking, before we are born, we did not exist as an empirical entity. We had previous life. But this particular name and form, this particular psychophysical mechanism, which we call is born, it did not exist before that particular baby is born. It existed as Atman, but at empirical level, it did not exist. To be able to describe something as existing at empirical level, it should have a form, and there are different forms in the world. So we have to identify one form from another form. So we need a name. And then we always interpret, explain people in terms of names, forms, characteristics, and other connections, relations, jadi, guna, karma, sambandha, and so on. That entity did not exist before the birth of a baby. So frequently, when we say somebody is born, what we mean in reality is the physical, psychophysical mechanism is born. That's a change. But that change is at the empirical level, not absolute level. That baby existed, even empirically the baby existed in another psychophysical form in his previous life. But Atman is not affected by these transitions from one life cycle to another life cycle. That's why Atman cannot be said to be born. So birth is a change. Existing is also a change. Growth is a change. Let's say growing from boyhood to youth, youth to middle age, and middle age to old age, and so on. All these are changes, modifications. Vikara or Vikriya. And then it undergoes another last change. It is called Vinashyati. That's also change. So death is a change, a modification. Birth is a change. But these modifications and changes take place only at the empirical level, at the bodily level. Dehinosmi yatha dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tatha dehantara prapti. Lord Krishna says earlier, in the second chapter. So, Lord Krishna says, this change it will not affect Atman. Yogi abhutva bhavita na jayate iduchyate. Na evam atma ato na jayate. That which does not exist earlier. And when it begins to exist at empirical level, we normally call it birth. That kind of modification also is denied in Atman. Yasmat evam tasmat ajaha yasmat namriyade tasmat nityascha. Because this Atman is born, because this Atman is not born, this Atman is unborn, it is never born, it is called aja, and therefore it remains the same. The modification or change implied by birth doesn't affect Atman. And therefore this Atman never dies. So the modification or change in the form of death also doesn't affect Atman. Yadyapi adintayoho vikrayoho pradishede sarva vikriyaha pradishiddha bhavanti tathapi madhyabhavininam vikriyanam sushabdehi eva tadarthehi pradisheda kartavedi anuktanam api yavvanadi samasta vikriyanam pradishedo yadhasyan idi aha shashvata ityadina. Another important implication of the word shashvata is mentioned here. So aja and so najayade namriyade, the word is used. Atman is birthless, Atman is deathless. So the first modification of the 6 modifications, Sadvikaras, is birth, that is denied. And the second modification mentioned here, namriyade, the last modification, death, that is also denied. Which means all the other changes in between are also denied. If Atman doesn't take birth, and if Atman doesn't die, then it also doesn't undergo the modifications or changes which we call existence, growth, change or evolution and decay. So adintayoho vikriyoho pradishedi sarva vikriya pradishiddha bhavanti ado ante chayan nasti vartamanevi tattatha. That is Mandukya Karika says. Ado ante chayan nasti vartamanevi tattatha. So it's a very interesting explanation in the Mandukya Karika. Suppose you make a pot from clay. At empirical level, you may perhaps say the clay has one existence and the pot has got another kind of existence only from a purely vyavaharika level, at the empirical level. But if you look at the nature of the pot that is sitting in front of you, or a pot in which you store water, or a cup made of clay with which you drink water, that glass of clay or pot made of clay is really not different from the clay, from the heap of clay that is lying there, from which the pot maker is continuously making pots and glasses and cups. So that pot, clay pot, never had an existence independent of clay. Because when it's broken, it goes back to clay. And before it was turned into a pot, it was clay. So when it is sitting in front of you in the form of a pot, then also it doesn't have a reality independent of the reality of the ontological reality of the clay. So ado ante chayan nasti vartamanevi tattatha. Before you made the pot, it was clay, and after you break it, it becomes clay. So even when that same clay is sitting in front of us as a pot, essentially from an absolutistic point of view, from a non-empirical transcendental point of view, that clay pot is still clay only. It doesn't have a different existence. So Atman is the same before birth and also after death. So in between, the Atman doesn't undergo modifications or changes like Asti, Vardhade, Viparinamade, Apakshiyade. These four modifications are also denied in Atman. So Yavanadi Samasta Vikriyanam Pradishetaha. So if birth is denied in Atman, then modifications of the psychophysical mechanism from this condition of a baby to a boy, from boyhood to youth, and youth to middle age, old age, all these changes are also denied in Atman. Atman remains the same. All these changes take place only at the empirical level, at the level of the psychophysical mechanism. Shashvadeti apakshay lakshana vikriya padishiddhiti shashud bhavat shashvataka. We already described this earlier. We described this particular expression we have explained. That is Gunapakshaya and Surupapakshaya both are denied in Atman. Na pakshiyade surupena niravayavatva nirgunatva cha na api gunakshayana apaksheha. Apakshe viparita api buddhi lakshana vikriya padishiddhite purana iti. So the Bhashyakara says there is another significance for the use of the word Purana, Pura Apinava. So, Apakshaya is denied, Gunapakshaya and Surupapakshaya. Because Atman is Niravayava, not composed of parts, it cannot have any kind of a modification or change, something gets lost. If something is made of different parts, some parts could be lost and then it loses its true nature. So Surupa Apakshaya will take place. Atman is not made of parts. So there cannot be any kind of Surupa Apakshaya. And Atman is beyond all kinds of gunas. So Gunapakshaya also cannot take place. A new gunas to be added or some existing gunas to be lost. That kind of apakshaya also change also cannot happen in Atman. Now Bhashyakara says the word Purana is used. That means any kind of modification, vikara or vikriya or change in the form of increase, something added to Atman. That also cannot happen. Atman cannot have any kind of addition to it, any more than it can lose any of its existing Surupa. So it is the opposite of Apakshaya. Apakshaya viparita apibuddhi lakshana vikriya padishiddhyate purana iti. Yohi avayavagamena upachiyade savardhade abhinava iti uchyate. So that which develops along its increase or growth of some parts, and then it may perhaps look new, but this Atman being Niravayava, not composed of parts, will always remain the same. Nothing can be added to it and it cannot lose anything. From the very beginning of time, so that's why the great Nilakanta says, Pura Vedadisusthe Pragavi Nava Eva. That's what Nilakanta says. From the very beginning of time, long before the creation of the sky, the sun, or the whole cosmic cosmos universe, the Atma was always fresh, it was Nava. So Navardhade ityartha. Tatha na hanyate na viparinagamyade hanyamani viparinamyamani api sarire. Same manner, tatha same in the same sense. Tatha na hanyate, na vivarinamyate. This Atman cannot undergo any kind of parinama, any kind of transformation. There is no viparinama in Atman. The Atman cannot undergo any parinama. Viparinamyate. Hanyamane. So viparinamyamane api shariri. Even the body may undergo changes, but along with the body, the Atman doesn't undergo any change. Khanti atra viparinamartho drishtavyaka. So apaniruktayadi na viparinamyate ityartha. So there is a problem here. Punarukti is a dosha. So in order to avoid this tautology, that is repetition of the same idea, the word hanti, that means to kill, to slay, is used in the sense of transformation. So hanana kriya hanti also is used in the sense of a transformation. There cannot be any kind of change, any kind of modification in the form of being killed or being destroyed. In the case of Atman, Atman remained the same. Viparinama cannot take place in Atman. That's the idea behind. Now here we have to remember one important principle. The central principle of Vedanta should be kept in mind. According to Shankara's philosophy, who is actually responsible for systematic formulation of the doctrine of Maya, the great Bhashyam tells us that the highest reality is always unchangeable. And therefore that unchangeable reality remains same. It's called Paramarthika Satta. At the same time, he makes it very clear that which is not Paramarthika Satta is not absolute non-existence. So Atman, which is the unchanging reality, which is Aja, Nitya, Shashwata and Purana, according to this verse, is a Paramarthika reality. It remains the same without any change or modification. Vedanta doesn't tell us that everything else is totally non-existent. Below the level of Paramarthika Satta, the Atman, the eternal, birthless, deathless, eternal reality, there is this empirical universe that we live in, that we interact with, that we have to coexist with. Shankaracharya doesn't deny the reality of this empirical universe, but he says this reality is only relative. This world of empirical experiences has a reality, but that reality is not the reality of Atman. It is Vyavakharika Satta. If Atman is Paramarthika Satta, this world is Vyavakharika Satta. So frequently we often mistake this world and we identify this world as something totally non-existent. When we read the Advaita textbooks, there is a lot of misunderstanding among those who don't get the clear picture of Shankaracharya's Advaita system. What he says is, this world of empirical experiences in which we live, in which we operate, it has an entity, but it's only relative. It comes into existence, it exists, it undergoes different changes like existing, growing, changing, evolving and decay. And finally, it may disappear and come back in another form. So this happens in the realm of the relative, which belongs to time, space and causation. It has an entity, it is not totally non-existent, It is not absolutely non-existent. What Shankaracharya says is this much. It is not absolutely real because it undergoes changes. Anything that undergoes changes is real only in the relative sense. So below this Paramarthika Satta, Atman, this empirical universe, that is Vyavaharika Satta, and below that we have this Pratibhasika, which may exist, perhaps an idea. It's not total unreality because it has a basis, but it is not even as real as the Vyavaharika Satta. At the lowest level, this total unreality, the Asat, which actually a contradiction in terms. If you mention certain things, the way you mention, the name you use to mention that entity itself implies the refutation of his existence. Panthya Putra. If it is Putra, if it is son, then he should have a mother. So barren woman cannot have a son. The horns of hair. Her hair, if the animal is hair, cannot have a horn. So all these things which belong to the category of Asat, absolute and total unreality, imply the very name of those entities itself implies its non-existence. The refutation, the denial of his existence. That belongs to the Asat. The other three categories, the Pratibhasika Satta, which could exist as an idea, but it may not be existing in front of us. And then this world of relative entities in which we live, which we experience, we practice meditation, we practice prayer, we practice puja, we practice all these spiritual practices we do at the Vyavaharika level. So Vyavaharika reality is not denied. That's an important point to remember. Because we can make our spiritual progress only by performing Karma Yoga, by practicing spiritual disciplines, Sadhana Sadhushtaya, Nitya Nityastu Vivega, Nihamutra Bharabhoga Viraga, Samadhi Sarka Sampatti and Mokshutvam. Discerning mind, discrimination between real and unreal, renunciation, then self-control and a strong desire for liberation, spiritual growth and evolution. All these qualities we can acquire only in this empirical world. And Shankaracharya says elsewhere, Pra-Brahmatma Vijnana Sarva Loka Vyavaharanam Satyatva Vidya. Ida Pra-Dishtasya Subodhat. So, Pra-Brahmatma Vijnanam Sarva Loka Vyavahara, Pra-Brahmatma Vijnanat Sarva Loka Vyavaharanam Satyatva Vidya. Before we realize our true nature, before we realize that we are the all-pervading immanent Atman, the omnipresent Atman, before that we have to live in this world, in this empirical world. We have to practice Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma, and then attain Chitta Shuddhi. Then only we actually realize the true nature. That's how our inner spiritual journey comes to an end. Before that, before we reach our destination, we have to look upon this world as a place, as an opportunity, as a platform where we live, work, do spiritual sadhana and evolve, continuing a spiritual journey. So that's a very important principle to be kept in mind. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.